The microphone was already in my hand. The room was full. Colleagues, executives, board members, all clapping as my name echoed through the hall. This was supposed to be my moment. My promotion ceremony. Years of late nights. Missed family dinners. Working twice as hard just to be taken half as seriously. I smiled as I stepped forward. And then my boss stood up. He didn't wait for applause to die down. He didn't wait for me to speak. He walked straight toward me and took the microphone out of my hand. "I think everyone here deserves to know the truth," he said. The room went silent. My heart skipped, not from fear but confusion. He looked straight at me and said, "She didn't earn this promotion. She slept her way into it." Gasps filled the room. Before I could even process those words, my husband stood up from the second row and said calmly, "It's true." That was the moment I realized something important. Some betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who know exactly where to aim. If you've ever been publicly humiliated, if someone tried to destroy your reputation in one sentence, stay with me. This story is for you. My name is Reina, and this is how the people who tried to erase me at work ended up erasing themselves. I had worked at Harrison & Cole Solutions for 12 years. 12. I started as an assistant when no one knew my name. I learned systems no one else wanted to touch. I fixed mistakes people above me were too proud to admit. I didn't complain. I didn't gossip. I didn't demand attention. I worked. That's why the promotion mattered. Not because of the title, but because it meant I was finally being seen. Or so I thought. My boss, Martin Hale, had always been polished. The kind of man who smiled while stepping on people. Who praised you in meetings and undermined you in private. He liked control. And I didn't fit into that anymore. The promotion didn't come from him. It came from the board. And Martin hated that. My husband, Evan, had changed months before the ceremony. He used to ask about my day. He used to listen. Then suddenly my success irritated him. "You're always working," he'd say. "You think you're better than everyone now?" I thought it was insecurity. I didn't realize it was preparation. Back in the hall, after those words were spoken, she slept her way into it. People wouldn't look at me. Some stared. Some whispered. Some nodded like it made sense. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not shame. Anger. Controlled anger. I looked at my husband. "Is that what you believe?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "I know it." Martin smiled. Satisfied. He thought this was the end of my career. What he didn't know was that I had already been collecting the truth for months. Not because I suspected this moment, but because when you're underestimated long enough, you start preparing for war quietly. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stepped back to the microphone Martin had dropped on the table, and I said one sentence. "Thank you for your honesty." The room froze. I turned, walked off the stage, and left the building. People thought I was defeated. They were wrong. That walk out of the building wasn't surrender. It was strategy. That night my husband didn't come home. But I didn't text. Didn't call. Instead I opened my laptop. And the folder I had named months ago. Just in case. Inside were emails. Meeting recordings. Performance reviews. Messages Martin had sent late at night and deleted the next morning. Inside were things Evan never knew I had. Because while they were planning my fall, I was documenting their climb. And climbs always leave fingerprints. I slept peacefully that night. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I finally understood something. They had made their move. Now it was my turn. I didn't go home that night. Not because I was scared to face my husband, but because I needed space to think clearly. I checked into a small hotel near the office, ordered tea, and sat by the window with my laptop open. The city lights outside looked calm. Unaware that two men had just tried to erase 12 years of my work in under 30 seconds. My phone buzzed. A message from Evan. "You embarrassed me today." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not sorry. Not "are you okay?" Not what happened. Just that. That was the moment my last doubt disappeared. I replied with one line. "We'll talk later." Then I turned my phone face down and opened the folder again. The folder that existed because deep down I had always known something like this could happen. Months before the promotion, Martin had started acting strange. Late-night emails, unnecessary compliments, invitations to private strategy meetings that didn't need to be private. I had refused every inappropriate hint politely, professionally, in writing, and that's where he failed. Because men like Martin assume women forget. I didn't. Every email was archived, every calendar invite saved, every meeting logged, including the one where he said, laughing, "You know, loyalty goes a long way in this company." And when I asked him to clarify, he replied, "You're smart. You know what I mean." That email was still there. Untouched. Unedited. Time-stamped. Evan had been changing too. First he was proud of me, then uncomfortable, then hostile. He started asking strange questions. "Does Martin message you a lot? Why does he always praise you? You sure you're not giving him the wrong idea?" I thought it was jealousy. I didn't realize it was coordination. Back at the hotel, I pulled up my email history with Evan. I searched one word. Martin. What came up made my stomach tighten. Emails I had never seen before. Forwarded messages. Private conversations. My husband and my boss had been talking. About me. About my schedule. My stress. My ambition. One message from Evan read, "She's been distant lately. I think work is more important to her than marriage." Martin replied, "That happens when women forget their place. Don't worry. I'll handle it." I leaned back in my chair. So that's what this was. Not a rumor. Not a misunderstanding. A plan. The next morning I went back to the office. People avoided eye contact. Some smiled awkwardly. Some whispered. Martin didn't come out of his office. Good. I didn't go to HR. Not yet. I knew better. I went to my desk, logged in and did my job like nothing had happened. Because nothing scares people more than a woman who refuses to break. At lunch my coworker Sarah sat across from me quietly. "I don't believe it," she said finally. I looked up. "Believe what?" "That you did what they said." I met her eyes. "Thank you." She leaned in closer. "Martin's been nervous all morning. He asked IT to pull old emails." My heartbeat stayed steady. "They can't delete what's already archived," I said. Sarah smiled faintly. That evening Evan came home. He didn't apologize. He paced. "You should have defended me," he said. "In front of everyone." I folded laundry calmly. "Defended you from what?" He stopped. "You know what I mean." "No," I said. "I really don't." He scoffed. "You're enjoying this. Playing the victim." I looked at him then. Really looked. The man who stood beside my boss while my reputation was burned to the ground. "I didn't ask you to speak for me," I said quietly. "But you chose to speak against me." He clenched his jaw. "You left me no choice." I nodded. "That's interesting. Because tomorrow you'll have plenty of choices." That night I sent 3 emails. One to HR. One to the board's ethics committee. One to a private employment lawyer. Each email included attachments. Not emotional explanations. Not accusations. Just evidence. Clean. Organized. Chronological. I didn't threaten. I didn't beg. I documented. 2 days later, Martin didn't show up to work. Neither did Evan, who worked in the same industry at a partner firm. Rumors spread fast when power shifts. By the end of the week, HR scheduled formal interviews. I walked into mine calm, prepared, and steady. Martin walked into his sweating. Because liars fear rooms with records. When HR asked me one question, "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" I answered honestly. Because I didn't know how far they would go. Now I do. They nodded. That was the moment I knew. The story had changed. And it wasn't in their favor anymore. That night, Evan tried one last tactic. He cried. Said he felt ignored. Said Martin manipulated him. Said he panicked. I listened. Then I said, "You didn't panic. You chose." And for the first time he had no response. I slept deeply that night. Because I knew something they didn't. This wasn't about saving my job anymore. This was about truth finding daylight. And in rooms where reputations matter, daylight is deadly. The investigation didn't explode the way people imagine these things do. There were no dramatic arrests. No shouting in hallways. No viral office videos. It moved quietly. Emails, meetings, closed doors. And that's how real power shifts, not with noise but with paperwork. Martin returned to the office 3 days later. He didn't look at me when he walked past my desk. That alone told me everything. Men like him thrive on eye contact, on dominance, on being seen. Silence unsettles them. By Friday, HR called me in again. This time, there were 2 additional people in the room. A representative from the board and an external legal consultant. They asked me to walk through the timeline. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't cry. I spoke the way I always had, clearly, calmly, fact by fact. When I finished, the consultant leaned back and said, "This isn't about a promotion anymore. This is about retaliation and defamation." Martin's name was spoken carefully. Evan's too. That was the first time I heard my husband described as a participant rather than a witness. And it mattered. That evening, Evan tried to talk again. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen, arms crossed. "They're calling me in next week," he said. I continued washing dishes. "You should tell the truth," I replied. He laughed nervously. "You think they'll believe you over me?" I turned the water off and looked at him. "They already have." His face changed. Fear has a sound, and it's very quiet. The following week, Martin was placed on administrative leave. The email went out at 9:17 a.m. No explanation. Just a temporary reassignment, pending review. By 9:30 everyone knew. People stopped whispering when I walked by. They started watching. Not me. The space where Martin used to stand. Evan wasn't suspended. But something worse happened. He was asked to explain. His firm wanted to know why his name appeared in internal communications discussing the professional sabotage of his own spouse. They wanted to know why he corroborated a false accusation in a public setting. They wanted to know if he understood what conflict of interest meant. At dinner that night, he barely touched his food. "This has gone too far," he said. "No," I replied. "It's finally going far enough." A few days later, I received an email from the board. The subject line was simple: promotion confirmation. They apologized. Formally. In writing. They acknowledged the false accusation. They acknowledged the harm. They acknowledged my conduct under pressure. And they confirmed something else. Martin would not be returning. The room was quiet when I read that email. No cheering. No relief tears. Just a deep, steady breath. Because this wasn't a win. It was correction. Martin requested a meeting. I agreed. Not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to look him in the eye one last time. He sat across from me in a small conference room. No confidence. No smile. "You ruined my career," he said. I shook my head. "No. You documented it yourself. I just didn't erase it for you." He leaned forward. "You think you're powerful now?" I met his gaze calmly. "I think accountability feels like power to people who've never had it." He had nothing else to say. That same week, Evan packed a bag. No argument. No dramatic exit. Just quiet defeat. As he stood at the door, he said, "I didn't think you'd go this far." I replied, "I didn't think you'd stand up in a room full of people and destroy me. But here we are." He nodded once. And left. The office felt different after that. Lighter. People spoke more carefully. Meetings were more transparent. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't being watched. I was being trusted. But the most important change wasn't professional. It was internal. Because somewhere between that ceremony and this silence, I had stopped seeking validation. I didn't need applause anymore. I needed peace. And I was finally close. The weeks after everything settled were strangely quiet. No emails. No meetings about the situation. No whispered conversations when I walked into a room. The noise had moved on. And for the first time in a long while, I could hear myself think. Evan didn't try to come back. He sent one message, short and careful. "I'm sorry. I didn't recognize myself in that moment." I read it once. Then I archived it. Some apologies arrive after the damage is done, not to heal you, but to ease the person who caused it. I didn't owe him comfort. The separation papers came 2 weeks later. I signed them without hesitation. At work, the promotion became official. Not announced again. Not celebrated publicly. Just real. I moved into my new office quietly, hung one framed photo on the wall, and got back to work. No one questioned my authority, because authority doesn't need defense when it's earned. One afternoon, Sarah stopped by my office. "They're using your case as a training example now," she said. "For what?" "How not to destroy a career with ego." I smiled, not because I felt victorious, but because the truth had weight now. I ran into Martin once more months later, at a cafe across town. He looked older, smaller. He saw me and hesitated, then nodded once. I returned the nod. Nothing else was needed. We had already said everything through our actions. People often ask me how I stayed calm, how I didn't explode, how I didn't scream or fight back publicly. Here's the truth. I was angry, but I learned something early in my career. Anger burns fast. Evidence burns slow. And slow fires change landscapes. My life didn't become dramatic after that. It became honest. I woke up without anxiety. I worked without fear. I slept without replaying conversations in my head. I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. I stopped explaining myself. And the strangest thing? The world adjusted. If you've ever been accused publicly, if someone tried to rewrite your story while you were still standing in it, remember this. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need revenge to reclaim power. You need clarity, patience, and truth. Because when truth finally speaks, it doesn't shout. It stays. My name is Reina. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger. This was justice built on restraint. And it changed everything. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or betrayed, this story is for you. Remember, quiet power isn't loud. It isn't chaotic. It's strategy, observation, patience, and the courage to act when the time is right. Share your own stories in the comments, your moves of silent power, the times you observed and waited, and the moments you finally reclaimed your dignity. Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated. Subscribe for more stories of justice, revenge, and quiet power. Because the most satisfying victories are the ones you win without anyone realizing how clever you were. Until it's already too late.